Hello, it's Candace from Beacon Hill Books. I'm here today with a sort of general discussion, wrap up, and how I want to handle my November reads. I read 12 books this month, which shocks me. I did have a little help from audio books, but instead of making one long video, concentrate on the nonfiction books for this wrap up. And then I'm going to subsequently add two other ones after this for the other genres of books. So I didn't get all of the challenges done for nonfiction November, but I'm okay with that because it was a busy month, and without audiobook, I probably wouldn't have gotten as much nonfiction as I did. The two audiobooks I listened to was The Stranger in the Woods by Michael Finkel. Mark Bramhall was the narrator, and also Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick. I did not look up the narrator. See if I can find it quick. George Guidall. Those were both nonfiction reads, and I had actually started The Stranger in the Woods before this month, and I had to get back in line to get it again, and I did, and finished it, and loved it. I was kind of concerned because I saw Mercy at Mercy's Musings not particularly fall in love with it. I think she rated it about a 3. But for me, I am fascinated by his story. And just like the author, who kind of was captivated by this guy, Christopher Knight, he lives like 20 plus years out in the Maine woods. And I will say the difference between him and most other people that do this type of thing is that he's not living off the land. He's stealing from people, mostly probably second houses, and then like a park or where he eventually gets caught. So that to me, he's such an intelligent person. And that to me just struck a chord. Like, I would have thought he would have that part in him as well, the sort of being able to scrounge around for food. But anyways, Michael Finkel is captivated by this guy. He flies all the way across country to see him multiple times. And Chris Knight is, I'm going to call him an introvert. I'm not quite sure. Michael Finkel talks about what type of personality disorders he possibly could have. I would say there's a fair amount of New Englanders that just like to be left alone, and he's one of them. He just doesn't want to have anything to do with people. And a lot of times he didn't usually want to talk to the author, but they ended up forming a sort of friendship, and Christopher Knight ends up sort of realizing that Michael Finkel will be like his biographer, and so he kind of lets him in a little bit. I liked the bits about how he lived when they were talking about where he lived in the woods, and how he had set up his trail to his cabin and to the other places where he was just very careful about being caught. Obviously, it took a long time for people to catch him. The people in Maine that were getting stolen from reacted different ways. Some people ended up starting to leave stuff on their door for him just to take and not have to break in. But there was an overall feeling of uncertainty, and they didn't, it was hard to know that, no matter what they tried, they couldn't catch this guy, and he kept breaking in. So, and then the last part also of the book I enjoyed, where Finkel talks a lot about hermits and just in general around the world and in history, some famous hermits. That's really interesting. Maybe another nonfiction discovery in the future. I did feel that the ending was kind of uneventful in a way. I don't want to give away, there's sort of a spoilery thing, but it held my intrigue the whole time, and I would definitely read it again or listen to it on audio. The other audiobook I listened to was Mayflower. Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick documents. It actually follows mostly two characters. One is William Bradford, who's one of the original pilgrims that comes over on the Mayflower, and Benjamin Church, who is a Indian fighter. Basically, comes in later in the story. The story opens up with Bradford and kind of how the pilgrims decided to move because of religious purposes, and how they ended up on the Mayflower, not the Speedwell, and things like that. And that chapter is like it. Then we move on from the Mayflower and we talk about Bradford, but the village and a lot of the people, I've mentioned this before, I'm related to one of them, John Alden, and BZ Mama is as well. And he was mentioned a few times. I wish they had gotten into more detail about some of the other people on the Mayflower. I'm going to have to look up another book about that. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. But it starts going into, of course, how the pilgrims then have to interact with the Native Americans, and they end up having a truce, but only with certain tribe of them. There's other ones there. And it ends in a catastrophe, really, with Benjamin Church sort of being the leader for eliminating a lot of the Indians in New England. It's very heartbreaking, and I really enjoyed learning more than just the surface details about the beginning parts of when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth and expanded a little bit. I would like to read more about that too. So if you have any other book recommendations about that, please let me know. The graphic novel that I read was March Book 3, which finishes this March series by John Lewis, and it didn't disappoint again as I expected. I cannot speak highly enough about this graphic novel. I think the illustrations are great. I think the storyline is great. It's, again, gets underneath that surface level detail, usual knowledge of people of the civil rights movement. It goes into this book, does touch a little bit on Malcolm X as well, but it has a lot of the lesser known people of the movement that you are not as familiar with, and then it kind of leaves you on a journey, a step of hope. It really drills home the message of the peaceful resistance and how poorly the African Americans were treated and how they were able to use peaceful resistance. It's just takes such strength and courage, and the amount of times that John Lewis was injured or put in jail and stood up for other people. It's just a great story, a great way to learn. So I'm very glad that I picked those up and read them. I finished Voices from Chernobyl, The Oral History of a Nuclear Disaster by Svetlana Alexievich. I'm sure I'm saying her name wrong. I'll post Mel's wrap-up video below here in the comments, but this story is, honestly, I cannot believe in school nobody talked about it. Like, I feel deficient that people aren't talking about this more. It's kind of like the book says, people don't want to talk about things like this. And I could have highlighted that whole book. I could randomly open any passage in here and break your heart. So it's told in little little snippets by individuals, sometimes by a group of individuals, and she just launches right into people's opinions and people's voices that never were heard and were basically buried, and these people that were impacted were lied to. Some people didn't even know they were volunteering to go to Chernobyl before they went. So I think it's one of those hard books, hard discussions that people should read. I would hope something like this wouldn't happen again in the future, but I feel like we haven't quite learned from even these things. in terms of from an environmental standpoint, look what happened just recently with the pipeline oil spill. But it was heartbreaking to read about the people and the animals that were impacted, how people in the government still made sure to try and mostly save their own, but not tell the Chernobylites what happened because they didn't want panic. Gorbachev basically doesn't want the population to panic. We talked to teachers, we talked to kids, we talked to liquidators, we talked to old women, we talked to people that survived the war, we talked to everything. And these titles are like The Monologue About Freedom and the Dream of an Ordinary Death. And these are people that actually returned to the Chernobyl area because they had nothing else. The papers are all lies. I didn't read anywhere about how we sewed ourselves protective gear, lead shirts, underwear. When the Chernobyl disaster occurred, how the puddles were green and blue, and how kids that go to school were called shiny, and the dosimeters were going off, and yet people were allowed to just keep staying where they are. A lot of the earth and animals that were killed were just thrown in a pit that weren't properly sanctioned off. This last quote, it says, "I wondered why everyone was silent about Chernobyl, why our writers weren't writing much about it, but we don't know how to capture some meaning from it. We're not capable of it. Who's to blame? In order to answer the question of how to live, we need to know who's to blame. We demand that all atomic stations be closed and the nuclear scientists be put in jail. We curse them, but knowledge by itself can't be criminal. Scientists today are also victims of Chernobyl. I want to live after Chernobyl, not die. I want to understand." Anyways, great book. I'll do another video after this with some of the other genres, but I just really would like to thank Olive and Gemma for doing Nonfiction November. I just there was such an involvement in the community. I've found so many other new booktubers and book recommendations. I hope everyone had a great Nonfiction November. Please let me know below what your favorite Nonfiction November read was, and I will talk to you all soon.